I was at a dinner party last week, and I was watching this couple I've known for years. Let's call the husband David. And he's the textbook definition of a good man. You know, stable, high-income job, pays the mortgage, incredibly attentive, never raises his voice. He was telling a whole table about the surprise vacation he had planned for their anniversary, and he's looking at his wife with just pure adoration. And she was smiling, but it was the kind of polite, tight-lipped smile you give a cashier who hands you a receipt. It was grateful, sure, but completely sterile. Then the conversation shifted. It shifted to a mutual acquaintance of ours, a guy who's, objectively a disaster. He's in and out of debt, reckless, arrogant, physically imposing, but just totally unreliable. The moment his name came up, the wife's whole demeanor just snapped. Her eyes lit up, her posture lifted, and she laughed at a story about him crashing a motorcycle with this kind of nervous, giddy excitement that, David's expensive vacation hadn't elicited even for a second. And it was an uncomfortable moment to witness, really, because the contrast was so sharp. To David, and probably to herself, it was just a weird mood swing or a funny story. But to anyone paying attention to the biology rather than the social niceties, it wasn't random at all. I realized I wasn't watching a marriage problem. I was watching two completely different evolutionary programs running at the same time. David was satisfying the safety requirement, but that reckless guy on the motorcycle, he was pinging a genetic code deep in her brain that doesn't care about safety, loyalty, or morality. A code that views men like David very differently than they view themselves.
Wow. That's a really powerful way to start, because you've just perfectly laid out the core conflict for this entire deep dive.
Right.
Our mission today is to explore one of the most, frankly, disruptive hypotheses in evolutionary psychology. It's called the dual mating strategy, or DMS.
And the idea is that female reproductive success isn't about finding one perfect partner.
Exactly. It's about optimizing for two fundamentally contradictory types of males, often at completely different times.
I think the most important thing for us right at the top is to set the emotional thermostat very, very low.
Yes.
We are peeling back the social veneer. We have to, just for this discussion, set aside our ideas about romance, fidelity, loyalty.
All the cultural structures we've built.
And expose what's underneath. We're looking at a cold, calculated biological algorithm.
It's ancient.
And it dictates attraction not based on what makes us happy or what makes a good marriage, but purely on what guarantees successful gene propagation and offspring survival.
It is absolutely brutal insufficiency.
Absolutely.
And that's the tension, isn't it? The modern brain is trying to run a 5,000-year-old social contract on top of a multi-million-year-old biological operating system.
So let's start there. Let's deconstruct the framework. The starting point has to be this non-negotiable evolutionary reality that makes this whole dual strategy necessary in the first place.
Right. And to do that, we have to operate in a space that is, it's completely stripped of morality.
Yeah, morality doesn't enter into it.
Not at all. We have to look at this through a lens of pure utility. In the theater of reproduction, morality is it's irrelevant. There are only successful gene propagators and unsuccessful ones.
And the whole DMS mechanism, the hypothesis goes, is driven by one single factor.
The most constraining factor in human reproduction, the enormous metabolic costs of gestation and, critically, of child-rearing.
And that's the key, isn't it? Unlike most other mammals, human babies are born totally helpless.
Completely altricial. They need this massive, sustained, multi-year investment of calories, of shelter, of physical security.
So this high cost means the female organism can't afford to solve just one problem. It needs the best genes and a guaranteed stream of resources.
It creates what you could call a bifurcated evolutionary imperative. The system needs two things that are almost never packaged together.
So it's forced to seek out two different types of men.
Exactly. Think of it like a really efficient investment strategy, running two different funds at the same time.
Okay.
You have a high-risk, high-reward stock fund for maximum genetic potential. And then you have secure, low-yield bond fund for guaranteed resource liquidity.
Okay, let's detail those two funds then. The high-risk one, that's the selection for good genes.
Right. The male, who is often called the alpha, or the Chad online.
And what is the organism trying to extract from that phenotype? What are the specifics?
Purely quality of heritable traits. The criteria are these brute indicators of fitness: viability, resistance to pathogens, physical dominance, a robust immune system.
All signaled by
high levels of testosterone and the physical markers of health and vigor. The whole point is to make sure the offspring inherits a superior genetic toolkit to survive and compete.
And then we shift to the other fund, the low-risk bond fund. the good investment or the provider?
This is David from your story.
Yeah, this is David.
The provider is essential for what we call somatic investment. He's the logistician.
The what?
The logistician. He guarantees caloric transfer food. He provides stable shelter. He ensures physical safety from threats.
And these men are selected for, for the opposite of aggression, right?
Often, yes. Low aggression, high compliance, and a demonstrable willingness to invest his resources over a long period of time. Stability is his defining trait.
And this is where the trade-off gets. Well, it gets really fascinating and kind of brutal. The theory says these traits are often mutually exclusive. Why can't the good genes guy also be the good investment guy?
The central conflict comes down to testosterone. High testosterone, which signals all those great genetic traits, dominance, vigor, competitiveness, it often correlates negatively with paternal investment.
So the more testosterone, the less likely he is to stick around and help raise the kid.
In general, yes. Men with very high testosterone levels tend to be more risk-taking, less compliant, and more likely to pursue short-term mating strategies. It just makes them unreliable anchors for long-term resource provision.
So the very qualities that make a man genetically superior, dominant, aggressive, competitive are the exact qualities that make him a high flight risk.
Precisely. You rarely find an apex predator who's also happy to, sit still and dutifully guard the den for 5 years.
And this dilemma, this need for genes from one source and resources from another, that's where strategic pluralism comes in.
That's the biological solution.
Yeah.
The organism is theorized to seek high-quality genes from one potentially short-term source.
The motorcycle guy.
And persistent, reliable resources from a completely separate long-term source.
David. So it completely reframes the idea of a relationship. When you look at David and the motorcycle guy through this lens, they're not even competing for the same thing.
Not at all. They're two separate non-fungible components. They're both required to complete a biological equation.
David is the investment capital. The reckless guy is the superior genetic input.
And the system, according to this theory, demands both.
So to understand how this strategy actually gets executed, we have to look at the machinery behind it, the regulatory mechanism.
Right. The brain doesn't just spontaneously decide to prefer two different men. It's chemically commanded to do so. And this command center is the neurobiological engine, regulated primarily by the cyclical flow of sex hormones.
Specifically estradiol and progesterone.
The two key players, yes.
So hormones aren't just, subtle mood modulators. They are system-wide regulators of incredibly complex behavior. Let's start with estradiol, which is a potent form of estrogen.
Estradiol is the behavioral accelerator. Its presence, particularly during the fertile follicular phase, is the biochemical cue to initiate the gene acquisition protocol.
And at a cellular level, what's it doing in the brain?
It's inducing transcription.
Yeah.
It's directly facilitating the expression of genes that are involved in reproductive readiness. It massively increases neuronal excitability.
So it's like throwing a high voltage switch.
That's a great analogy. It primes the entire nervous system for action, specifically for action, geared towards mating stimuli and competitive display. It temporarily wires the brain to be highly attuned to those markers of genetic quality.
And then progesterone comes in.
Progesterone enters the picture as the counterregulator. Its sustained rise after ovulation is the definitive signal that the fertile window has closed.
And when that progesterone signal goes up, what happens?
Priority shift. Completely. The resource acquisition phase begins. Progesterone is the hormone of stability, of maintaining a potential pregnancy. So its rise is like a chemical fog lifting the acute desire for genetic novelty.
And replacing it with
a preference for safety, for provisioning, for settling down. These two hormones, cycling predictably, are basically the software switches for the dual mating strategy. They dictate the timing of that shift from alpha attraction to beta appreciation.
And this is all synchronized with the actual mechanics of reproduction through the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis.
Yes, and the crucial orchestrator there is gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH.
And its job is to synchronize the neurobiological state, the behavior, with the massive ovulatory surge of luteinizing hormone, or LH. This makes sure that the heightened mating drive and that violent shift in partner preference only happen during the narrow, brief window when conception is actually possible.
So the body isn't wasting energy. It's incredibly precise.
It's all about minimizing metabolic waste.
You mentioned before that the link between a single gene and a complex social behavior like this involves, 6 causal links. That seems important to understand.
It's a crucial concept because it shows why this science is so challenging. There's no gene for cheating. It's not that simple.
Instead, the path is tortuous. A single gene codes for a protein. That protein influences a neural circuit. That circuit contributes to a motivational state. That state biases a cognitive process,
which predisposes an individual toward a certain behavioral trait,
which then manifests as the social behavior we observe. It's a huge cascade, not a simple switch. So we're talking about a subtle, powerful, foundational bias in the brain's motivational structure, not a pre-programmed command.
And this isn't just happening in the neurons, right? You said even the brain's support structure is involved.
It is. The glia, the non-neuronal cells, and the meninges, the protective membranes around the brain, they are all directed by these sex hormones. They create an entire chemical environment that encourages or discourages certain behaviors related to mating.
Okay, so we focus on the female hormonal cycle here, but what about the male side? How do we get that aggressive, dominant, alpha tendency in the first place?
Well, male aggression and dominance are fundamentally mediated by testosterone and its metabolites. That's what drives the competition and the physical displays.
But it's not just a testosterone story.
No, it's not. The expression of that aggression is regulated by other systems. Specifically, serotonergic projections to the four brain circuits that use serotonin are crucial in modulating aggression.
So a guy can be high on testosterone, but serotonin determines whether that energy turns into competitive drive or just uncontrolled violence.
In the simplified way, yes, it's a regulatory relationship. So the supply of those attractive alpha traits is also condition-dependent and chemically regulated.
Which brings us to the main event, the ovulatory shift hypothesis, or OSH.
This is the genetic hijack in action.
This is that period where high estradiol and low progesterone cause the resource-seeking part of the brain to take a temporary but critical backseat.
The OSH is the central event of the whole DMS framework. It posits that women experience these adaptive changes in subconscious preferences, thoughts, and behaviors precisely during that peak fertility phase.
This is a biological juncture where the entire preference matrix just shifts violently.
It overrides long-term relationship priorities in favor of finding and securing markers of high genetic fitness.
So this is where attraction to traits like kindness and stability just evaporates, and the organism starts hunting for raw genetic signals.
Exactly.
So let's detail those specific genetic markers. What are the things that researchers claim become highly attractive during peak fertility?
Okay, the first is about physical signaling. Symmetry and masculinity.
Symmetry.
Right. Studies have looked at the preference for high facial and bodily symmetry. Symmetry is a really robust signal of developmental stability.
Meaning the person handled stress well during development?
Exactly. They resisted pathogens, they had good nutrition. So women at peak fertility reportedly rate more symmetrical men as significantly more attractive, especially as short-term partners.
And the attraction to really masculine features, the strong jawline, muscularity, deep voice, that gets amplified too. But why? We just said high testosterone can mean he's a poor long-term provider.
And this is where the concept of the immunocompetence handicap becomes absolutely essential.
Okay, break that down.
Testosterone is, by its very nature, an immunosuppressant. It temporarily lowers the body's immune response because it's diverting all this metabolic energy toward building muscle, competitive behavior, things like that.
It's a biological tax, a huge one.
A massive tax. So if a male is highly masculine, he has all that testosterone, and yet he's still healthy, he's still thriving despite this immunosuppressive tax.
He's sending a message.
He is broadcasting a very powerful, very honest message. My underlying genetic quality is so superior, I can afford to pay this tax and still come out on top.
And that signals incredibly high-quality genes. And the OSH claims the preference for this is heightened only during that brief, fertile window.
Which would confirm it as a genetic optimization strategy, not a general preference.
But the attraction isn't just visual, it's also invisible, right? It's rooted in the immune system itself.
This brings us to the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC. A suite of genes that's central to our adaptive immune response. It helps the body recognize and fight off pathogens. And it's highly variable between people.
And for reproduction, the goal is to create offspring with a more diverse immune system than either parent.
Right. A new combination that can tackle more threats. And one way to achieve that is to select a partner whose MHC profile is dissimilar to your own.
And how would you even know?
Through scent. Researchers have found that, especially at high fertility, women show a distinct preference for the body odors of men with dissimilar MHC profiles.
They literally smell more attractive.
They find the scent more attractive and more masculine. It's an ancient mechanism designed to promote genetic diversity in the offspring.
But this is a bit nuanced, isn't it? I remember seeing a meta-analysis that suggested it's not just about dissimilarity, but about overall diversity.
That's a critical nuance, yes.
Yeah.
The evidence for pure dissimilarity is a bit mixed, but what the studies do strongly suggest is that we're reliably attracted to individuals with more heterozygous MHC genotypes.
Meaning their own internal immune system genetics are more diverse to begin with.
Which signals better overall immune capability. That's always an advantage.
Yeah.
But it's also true that research into MHC and scent is incredibly difficult to standardize, which leads to some of this conflicting data.
Okay, so let's get back to the behavioral markers. Back to the motorcycle guy. The attraction to risk, to dominance, even to what we would call socially toxic behavior, that's magnified.
Right, because in the realm of pure biology, risk-taking, arrogance, social dominance, the stuff we might label dangerous, it's interpreted by those ancient brain structures as a signal of surplus vitality.
So if a guy is reckless but he survives and still acquires status,
it suggests his genetic makeup is resilient enough to absorb those high costs. The preference mechanism is essentially ignoring the social risk and focusing only on the genetic resilience being demonstrated.
So the algorithm just completely overrides social training. The desire isn't for a man who is safe, but a man who is superior, even if that superiority is packaged with chaos.
And beyond these direct mate preferences, the OSH hypothesis is also tied to subtle cognitive and behavioral shifts in the woman herself during this time.
Okay, like what?
The whole system is geared toward optimizing conception. So first, sexual motivation. Sexual desire and drive reliably increase during the fertile window.
There's a nuance there, too.
A very important one. While general desire is up, studies show the desire for specifically uncommitted sex does not reliably track fertility. It's more about a general state of reproductive readiness, not necessarily promiscuity.
That's a key distinction. It's not a drive to just chase partners. It's a heightened state of internal readiness if the right genetic signals appear.
Exactly. And this state manifests outwardly in terms of appearance and competition.
How so?
Research shows a demonstrable increase in investment in appearance during the fertile phase. Women spend more time on their look, they wear more revealing clothing, they buy more appearance-enhancing products.
And this is driven by competition with other women.
It appears to be a huge factor. The behavior increases specifically when women are exposed to photos of attractive female rivals. And self-reports from this fertile period show increased competitiveness, a tendency to describe other women as less attractive, and even a willingness to use more dehumanizing language toward female rivals, but not toward male rivals. The stakes of the genetic lottery are high.
And the body is redirecting energy to this priority.
It seems to be. Some studies show women exhibit more spontaneous activity, like walking more steps, suggesting an effort to increase potential mate encounters.
And on the other side?
Some studies have found women actually consume fewer calories during this fertile period, possibly diverting metabolic energy away from eating and toward the energetic requirements of all this mating-related behavior.
So the body is running hot, prioritizing reproduction over finding the next meal, in an ancestral sense. And if women are signaling this, the system only works if men are picking up the cues.
Correct. And they do subconsciously. Men and even other women can detect cues of high fertility. Some researchers call it a subtle estrus-like state.
And what are those cues? What are they picking up on?
The primary ones are body odor, which is rated as more attractive during the fertile window. There are subtle shifts in physical attractiveness, maybe due to soft tissue symmetry changes. And reliably, vocal pitch increases slightly.
And for a man who's already in a committed relationship with the woman who's cycling, what's his response?
It's highly significant and defensive. When a male partner perceives his partner is at peak fertility, he can become more protective, possessive, and jealous.
Mate guarding.
An adaptive mate guarding strategy, exactly, to minimize the risk of what's called extra-pair copulation.
And there's more. If he's exposed to male rivals during this phase,
his own testosterone levels can measurably increase. It's a hormonal competitive response. The whole system is a feedback loop.
This whole framework is incredibly powerful. It provides a clean explanation for that David anecdote. But, and this is a huge but, we have to talk about the scientific debate. This is not settled science.
No. It is absolutely essential to present the nuance here. While those early studies, the small-scale lab setups, reported really strong support for the OSH,
the later, more rigorous reviews
have yielded much more skeptical results.
So why is that? Where is the friction in the data?
It's in a few areas. First, Methodological challenges. Measuring these subtle psychological shifts across a menstrual cycle that varies widely between individuals in a world where culture masks everything. It's just incredibly difficult.
And a lot of the early studies didn't even use hormonal verification, right? They relied on self-reported cycle days.
Which is notoriously unreliable. And the newer studies that do use daily hormonal assays, they struggle to replicate those strong effects.
So the argument is that the shift might be real, but it's so subtle that modern life just overrides it.
Precisely. Or at least makes it very hard to measure in a broad population. Newer reviews conclude there's little or no robust empirical support for women fundamentally changing the type of men they desire. The effects, if they exist, are often not significant enough to be considered evolutionarily adaptive in a reliable way.
That completely reframes the initial claim. If the preference shift isn't reliable, what is?
What remains reliably supported is the underlying hormonal mechanism.
How so?
The strongest evidence comes from hormonal contraceptives. The pill.
Right.
Studies reliably show that these synthetic hormones weaken or entirely eliminate these subtle cycle shifts.
Because they suppress ovulation. They get rid of that high estradiol, low progesterone phase.
Exactly. They effectively stabilize the female preference matrix in the provider mode.
So the elimination of the shift when you take away the natural hormone cycle, that's powerful evidence that the cycle is the engine driving the effect.
It is. It confirms the hormone cycle is the biological switch, even if its ultimate behavioral expression is messy and hard to capture in a lab.
So then we transition. The ovulatory window closes, progesterone rises, and we enter the second half of the strategy.
The luteal phase. This is the resource extraction protocol.
The biological imperative shifts completely. The time for genetic shopping is over.
Now, the priority moves from gene acquisition to environment stabilization.
And progesterone is the hormone of settlement and safety.
Its rise is the physiological signal that the body has to focus on environment assessment. Has conception occurred? If so, resources must be secured. If not, resources still need to be maintained, and the selection criteria revert to favoring stability.
The hormonal fog that made the risky high testosterone male so attractive, it just dissipates.
It does. And the long-term provider male, the good dad, suddenly becomes the essential focus again. You're switching back from the high-risk stock fund to the secure, dependable bond fund.
And mate preference shifts accordingly.
Accord what are often called good parenting traits. Willingness to invest, emotional compatibility, low aggression, predictable behavior. All the things that support a safe, long-term partnership.
And socially, we call this growing up or finally finding a nice guy.
But biologically, it's the organism executing the resource optimization half of the strategy. It's the comfort bet. It's securing the logistical support network you need to raise a metabolically expensive human child.
So that's the functional distinction. High fertility favors the sexy cad traits for short-term genetic evaluation.
And low fertility favors the good dad traits for long-term investment evaluation. The body is running these two programs sequentially, independently, to optimize for the survival of the future offspring.
And the energy shifts we saw during the fertile window, the increased activity, the suppressed appetite, that all reverses.
The body returns to a state that prioritizes resource accumulation and stability. Energy is redirected away from aggressive mate seeking. Appetite might normalize or increase, focusing on building caloric reserves. The whole nervous system just settles down.
This is where the ancient system just collides with modern society.
This is the conflict. The DMS creates this fundamental tension within modern monogamous societies, where loyalty is treated as a moral choice, but the body is operating under this relentless, cycling biological pressure.
Like the story of Clara, the lawyer's wife with the perfect provider husband who was consumed by this craving for a reckless bike messenger.
Her experience of guilt, that feeling of being a passenger in her own body, that perfectly encapsulates the dilemma. Her conscious, socialized mind was committed to her marriage.
But her deep evolutionary programming was temporarily overriding that commitment because it viewed her husband as genetically deficient, just for that brief, critical window.
It treats the social contract as a temporary obstacle to be overcome. Understanding this reframes the issue from a simple moral failure to a complex biological process that individuals often feel powerless to control.
So if this instability is inherent in the design, how do societies even try to manage it? This seems to bring us to life history theory.
LHT is an excellent framework for this. It's about how organisms allocate time and energy between growth, maintenance, and reproduction, all based on the risks in their environment.
And you have two broad strategies, slow and fast,
Slow life history and fast life history.
Yes. So let's define the slow strategy. This aligns with stable, monogamous societies.
Right. Slow LHT is for stable, resource-rich environments with low mortality. The strategy emphasizes delayed reproduction and a significant sustained investment in fewer offspring.
And the values are long-term planning, self-control, cooperation.
And monogamy is the institutional expression of that. It signals long-term commitment and cooperative resource pooling.
And contrast that with the fast strategy.
Fast LHT is for unpredictable, harsh environments where life is short. The strategy shifts to maximizing the quantity of offspring quickly because long-term investment is too risky.
So earlier sexual maturity, more partners, more risk-taking.
Preference for immediate rewards, exactly. And individuals high on fast LHT traits also tend to score higher on things like psychopathy, boldness, aggression, disinhibition. These are the sexy CAD traits, necessary when stability just can't be guaranteed.
And this link is fascinating when you look at modern relationship structures, specifically the stigma around consensual non-monogamy, or CNM.
It is. Research consistently suggests that individuals who practice CNM open relationships, polyamory report life history traits associated with that faster strategy.
Like unrestricted sociosexuality and, in women, earlier pubertal development.
Right.
So if they're all consenting and communicating, why does society still instinctively stigmatize these relationships? Why is monogamy seen as morally superior?
The condemnation is proposed to stem from the ancient perception that non-monogamy signals a fast life history strategy,
Which is seen as destabilizing to the cooperation required for a slow LHT society.
Exactly. Your ancient brain links sexual behavior with trustworthiness and future risk. If I see someone pursuing a fast strategy, my brain interprets that as a threat to my safety, my resources, and my children's survival.
Because that strategy is associated with partner abandonment and violent competition?
So the moral stigma is an evolved psychological mechanism to enforce the social rules like monogamy that constrain behaviors perceived as damaging to the collective. Monogamy isn't just a romantic choice. It's a profound signal of cooperative intent.
This all leads to a deeply painful situation for the male who fulfills the provider role. For David, let's talk about the psychological consequences for him when the DMS is executed successfully through cheating.
In evolutionary terms, extra pair population, or EPC, is a biological corrective measure. If the primary partner, the provider, lacks the optimal genetic markers, the female is driven to get that superior genetic input elsewhere during her fertile window.
And the outcome is brutally efficient for the offspring.
Conception happens with the genetic superior, the Chad, but the resource costs, the pregnancy, the calories, the shelter, are funded by the long-term resource provider, the Beta.
It maximizes the offspring's survival chances. Superior immune system plus guaranteed resource flow.
But for the human male, the psychological consequence is devastating because he's investing massive resources into a genetic line that is not his own.
I think about that anecdote about David learning from the family paralegal that his child wasn't biologically his. He was the perfect provider.
And when the paternity test confirmed it, his entire self-perception, his understanding of his own utility, it just collapsed. He realized he had been selected and maintained not for love or loyalty, but for his utility as a logistical support mechanism.
He was biologically taxed.
Investing his entire future into the survival of a genetic line that was superior to his own. His utility was ruthlessly defined by nature. Ensure the survival of the offspring, regardless of paternity.
And it just underscores that core message. Nature is completely indifferent to our human concepts of fairness or emotional commitment.
It is only interested in functional, brutal efficiency. His emotional wreckage is the human cost of the dual mating strategy successfully running its cold, efficient course.
So, to synthesize this, the dual mating strategy assigns these very clear, very functional roles.
Absolutely. The Chad is the object of raw biological desire, valued solely for his genetics. He's the high-risk, high-reward stock fund.
And the provider is the object of safety and comfort, valued for his survival utility and his resources, the secure, dependable bond fund.
They are not in competition for the same role. They fulfill two different necessary functions.
What this deep dive reveals, then, is that so much of the conflict, the confusion, the relationship instability we see, it's fundamentally the product of these two contradictory evolutionary programs running at the same time in the same brain. Human attraction isn't monolithic. It's a cycling hormonal algorithm designed for genetic optimization and offspring survival. And it really doesn't care about our social expectations of loyalty, that uncomfortable tension that we all feel. That is simply the ancient past of our biology meeting the modern present of our society.
The greatest evolutionary pressure in modern society may not be finding a mate, but reconciling a multi-million-year-old biological code with a 5,000-year-old social contract.